What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It's been a little bit since I talked about a movie here on the channel. Took a little bit of an unplanned break, but I'll take it, I guess. And today we're going to be talking about a film I got to check out a little bit early, and that movie is called American Dreamer. This is the directorial debut for Paul Dektor. It is written by Theodore Melfi and Christopher Wenner, and stars people like Peter Dinklage, Shirley MacLaine, Matt Dillon, Danny Pudi, Danny Glover, Kimberly Quinn, and many more. And before we get too far into this video, as I typically like to do anytime I get to check out a movie a little bit early, I'd like to say a big thanks to those kind folks that sent me over the early screener for this film. This film is coming to us from Vertical Entertainment and will be releasing on March 15th of 2024. So again, a big thanks to Vertical Entertainment for sending me over another early screener to one of their movies. Whether I enjoy the films or not, I'm always happy to check out one of their movies. It's always a pleasure to check out any of their movies early. And so yeah, this was one that instantly kind of grabbed my attention simply because right on the poster, you have Peter Dinklage and Shirley MacLaine. And as the movie was rolling, even though I went into it with zero knowledge on who was in this movie, I was very pleasantly surprised to see all of the rest of those names that I already mentioned, like Matt Dillon or Danny Pudi or Danny Glover. So right out of the gate, you got a pretty strong cast, and I'm always interested to see a first-time director directing something, because sometimes magic can happen from that. So let's talk about what this movie is all about before I get into my thoughts on the movie. The movie focuses on Peter Dinklage's character, Dr. Phil Loader, who is a dreamer, as the title would suggest. He wants to have a big fancy home. He has imaginations in his mind of having two women around his arm at all times, two twins to be exact, and he just wants to have a multi-million-dollar home. So he attends all of these various open houses for homes that are way outside of his budget, just so he can feel like, you know, he's part of that world, that it feels like something that he could attain. His realtor in the film is played by Matt Dillon, who invites him to these open house events, but knows right out of the gate that, you know, Peter Dinklage's character is not going to be able to afford any of this, as he's just a kind of bottom tier, not even tenured professor at a local college. So he's pretty much down on his luck. He's got a beat up car, he lives in a small efficiency, and he really doesn't have much going for him, but he wants all of these things. He wants these big dream-like ideas. And so not too long into the film, he actually looks in the newspaper and sees something that he thinks may be too good to be true, but he asks his realtor to check it out with him. It's a multi-million-dollar home that you can either purchase right out of the gate at multi-million dollars, or you can pay for it at $250-something thousand instead. And that person who lives there already, played by Shirley MacLaine, an old woman named Astrid, gets to still live there until she passes away. So he's like, okay, I guess that's not the worst thing. I get the whole property, I get all the land, I get this multi-million-dollar house. I just have to live in a smaller portion of the house until the woman who already lives there passes away. Can't be that bad, right? Well, after actually doing that, he starts to realize that maybe this woman isn't going to pass away anytime soon. He starts to question whether or not their contract has any sort of validity, and some other obstacles end up getting in his way of possibly owning this home. As it starts to progress, as you would expect, he starts to build a relationship with this woman who already lives in the home, as well as some of the people who come to visit her throughout the course of the film, specifically a woman played by Kimberly Quinn. Again, I won't get too much further into what happens in this movie so I don't spoil anything for you, but that's the base gist of this film. On one hand, the movie is a comedy that I enjoyed at times. I found myself enjoying some of the moments of humor and some of the characters. You have a really strong cast here, so the performances aren't really necessarily an issue, but where I did struggle with this film has to come down to the directing that you can tell the actors were given, as well as the writing. The characters for me were a mess throughout the course of this film, most notably Peter Dinklage's character Phil Loader, who is likable at times and then oftentimes incredibly hard to really root for, as he tends to be a very irrational character. Now, on one hand, that can lead to a lot of humor, but on another hand, it makes him a hard character to really get behind, because there are times he just makes really poor choices that put him into a worse position than he was before, or he just says the wrong thing that tends to be hurtful to those around him. I think the movie at times tries to portray his character as one of those characters who is really sarcastic and a pain in the ass at times, but has a huge heart. And while I think it does succeed in that at times, it oftentimes just makes him feel like a really selfish character who has selfless moments in a film that ultimately doesn't really know where to lean when it comes to his character. So by the time we got to the end of the movie, while I enjoyed moments with our main character in this movie, and I do think Peter Dinklage does a fine job in terms of performance, when it came down to the writing for his Glover's character, I found it was very wishy-washy, which was a consistent thread I had with a lot of the other characters. Other characters played by like Matt Dillon or Danny Glover are pretty straightforward. You know who they are. Matt Dillon plays a realtor, as I mentioned before, who has a lot of money, and so he's kind of there as this advisor to Peter Dinklage's character as well as a friend. He's kind of an a-hole, but he's kind of funny throughout the course of the film as well. Danny Glover plays a private investigator that Peter Dinklage's character hires throughout the course of the film for specific reasons, and he too is very straightforward. You know what kind of character he is, and he's quite funny. He was probably the funniest part of the movie for me. But outside of that, when it comes down to our two main characters in the film, which were played by Peter Dinklage and Shirley MacLaine, I just felt that their characters were a little bit all over the place. You never really fully knew which way their characters were going to lean, and there were some developments between their characters later on in the film that I really didn't expect came out of nowhere and just ultimately felt again like a mishmash of a bunch of story ideas that didn't really feel coherent. Outside of my thoughts on the narrative though, the film is well shot. It's got a solid enough musical score that accompanies this film, the way the film is edited and all those things in terms of how the movie is put together. It's competently made, but when it came down to the thing that I care for the most when I go to watch a movie, which is the characters and the story, unfortunately this film just did not work for me. Again, you have a pretty strong cast here. I think they all did a good job. I do think there's going to probably be an audience of people who enjoy this movie enough, but I don't necessarily think this is a movie that's really going to just captivate people, especially with a lot of the top tier movies that we are getting these days. This is a film that actually, if you go on IMDb, will say 2022, and that's because it's been floating around various movie festivals until now, where it was eventually purchased by Vertical Entertainment to officially be released this year. So the fact that it's taken that long for it to kind of float around and get somebody to purchase this film, I think speaks for itself in terms of how good this movie is, and I'm sure there was a lot of studios that watched it and felt similarly to the way I feel. Again, I don't necessarily think it's the worst film in the world, but it ultimately just felt a bit messy at times, and it felt very inconsistent when it came to the characters, and it ultimately left me feeling a little bit by the time the movie was over. So that's going to be my thoughts on American Dreamer. I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. If you came to this review long after the movie's been released and that's what brought you to the review, well, welcome to the channel. I hope you stick around and hit that subscribe button and hit that like button. But most notably, I hope you drop a comment down below and let me know what you thought about this movie and what brought you to this review. Or if you're watching this before the movie comes out, you're one of my returning viewers, whatever the case may be, welcome back. And also let me know down below, is this something that's been on your radar? Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.